Hello. Welcome back to this session, and I am joined by Ed Thomas today. So this is a session I think out of all of them today, I've been most excited about. And I think maybe because of that all-important question that is in the title, is grammar really that important? Question mark. So I am very interested in this, as I don't want to use serious terms about grammar and myself, but I feel like we may be at opposing ends of the spectrum here. We'll see. So Ed, thank you so much for joining us. So what is quite funny as well is when I read your bio, I first read it as a comms bad boy working in housing. It does in fact say a comms bod working in housing. So the irony there.
I'd take either, I suppose. I don't know.
And you are working in housing, and you're trying to make a difference to people's lives every day. So with the penultimate session, and I hand over to you for full control. Thank you very much.
Wow. I now have control, which is a pretty frightening thought, really. But thank you very much for everyone tuning in. I perhaps made the mistake of tuning in to the session before because it was talking about how to talk and kind of present with impact, and so I just listened in to kind of 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of that, and I will be going back later, or certainly at some point in the next 12 months, everything available for 12 months, of course, to finish that off. But it probably anyway, I've probably slightly put myself on edge doing that, and the fact this morning I was in the office and we were doing some media training with board members, and I was getting massive FOMO because the firewall in the office wouldn't let me join. So not only have I missed this morning's content, I was arguably doing something more important. Arguably not, but I've missed out on points on the leaderboard. So ask questions. We might have a poll. Everyone can have gets points for that. So join in to your heart's content. I'm not in the top 3 anymore. I'm blaming the board session we did this morning. Anyway, less of me kind of getting a few things off my chest. Let's actually start talking about what we're here to talk about. So is grammar really that important? I am going to share my screen, and we'll see how all of this goes over the course of the next kind of 15-20 minutes as I speak. So here I am, and I'm not swearing, although sometimes grammar and all those rules and things kind of slightly make me want to. I am just talking about different punctuation marks, of course, but and I should just say I've had to change the second slide off the back of the very first session this week, where Russell Anderson Williams was talking about kind of letting people in your organization, letting them kind of their imaginations run riot with kind of clip art and bits and pieces. So this is for you. Look at this. Isn't that absolutely spectacular? Anyway, so is grammar really that important? We're going to go on a bit of a journey this afternoon, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about how how we use grammar, how it impacts on kind of impactfulness of key messages, and then I want to talk about my own kind of perspective on this, and ultimately open this up into having a conversation around inclusion and making things easy to understand. So let's kind of first of all talk about grammar, and I'm not going to talk about loads of grammatical terms and things, mainly because I don't know what they mean, but let's just consider for a minute that grammar is actually just a set of rules, and we all know that rules are not necessarily boring, but basically rules are there to be broken. And what I really think about the use of grammar is how can we use grammar to make our key messages as communicators, how do we make them impactful? So impact, I think, is a key thing. We measure impact. We need the materials that we produce, the messages that we create to cut through and land with our audience. I don't know. I'm going to probably, we would all more or less agree with that, or we'd come up with something a little bit different. And for me, what that means is you've got to create everything in a way that your audience understands. Now, you could have a brilliantly defined audience and of people in a particular sector with who work in particular roles, or it really depends what are you marketing, what are you communicating. For me in housing, what our key audience is our customers. So at the Recon Housing Group, we've got 13,500 properties around Telford and Wrekin, Shropshire and Staffordshire, and in those properties there are around about 28 to 30,000 people living in them. So what I take away from that is my key audience is a subset of the general public, and within the general public you've got a whole range of needs, wants, various characteristics, and that's a big challenge, a massive creative challenge, and one that I relish every day. But when we're thinking about that, I've got a little question for all of you, just to keep us going. So hopefully a poll will pop up in a minute. What I want to ask is, what is the average reading age in the UK? So hopefully this will pop up. Go into the little poll tab, top right of your screen. There it is. I've submitted my vote, and we'll just let it run for a bit. A few more seconds. We could do with some elevator music, couldn't we? We're gonna stop when we get to 25 votes. There we go. So 48% 9, 40% 12, 12% 15. The average reading age in the UK is 9. So what I take from that is we need to be thinking, to cut through to a really broad audience, you need your average 9-year-old to be able to understand what you're saying. So what do we need to do? I've got so into it, I've forgotten to do my big reveal. There we go. For those of you that know me, cakes, sweet treats that had to kind of feature somewhere in what we wanted to say. So everything is about making the average 9-year-old be able to understand what you're saying. Now, as a housing provider, that's to do with, some of it can be quite not necessarily complicated, but there's lots of regulation, gas servicing, building safety information, and bits and pieces like that we need that we do need customers to understand. We need customers to let us into their home, to let us service boilers and do things like that. And if you've ever read regulation, it's complicated. For me, it's not like a pleasant way of spending an afternoon, but it's got to be done, because you've got to understand all of that stuff in order to create the really simple message at the end of it. So what do you need to do here? And actually, what you need to do is probably what everyone is trying to do anyway: strip jargon out, make sentences shorter. I was doing a bit of research. So another thing you're supposed to do is to use no, or certainly less, abstract nouns. I don't know what an abstract noun is, so I've got no idea if I use them. So simplicity is absolutely key, and I think this is where slogans and really simple messaging comes in. And so let's just have a quick look at a few examples just from the last few years. Well, some of these are brands where they've been using these slogans and things for a long time, but we absolutely understand and get the kind of the word association. Just do it. I'm loving it. Every little helps. We know the brands. We know what they're trying to say, and the simplicity is there. So it's power of three. But other than just do it, there's not a single punctuation mark in those examples. And for me, the full stop of just do it, full stop, no excuse, is actually kind of part of the message. So really what I want to say here is it's not don't use grammar, it's just think about how you use grammar. So if you've got a 45-word sentence with 6 commas in it, that's too complicated. A 9-year-old will not understand that. So, or the average 9-year-old won't understand that. There's bound to be an exception. So short sentences, and make things memorable. So this is, alliteration and things are good here. And and in addition to the brands that we've that I quickly talked about there, I think public messaging, when it's done really, really well, this is what it all boils down to. So hands, face, space, some of that messaging right at the beginning of the pandemic, I felt was absolutely fantastic. Everyone understood exactly what to do, and it was only when things got more complicated later, the message became, well, I've just said it became more complicated. People didn't know quite what to do. So there's a disconnect there between the simplicity, and that's because we're using more words, getting longer, more difficult to understand, etc., etc. Eat out to help out. So that's another kind of COVID campaign. And then I'll stick get Brexit done. It doesn't matter what your personal perspective on that is. It's a phrase that you understand, and you understand what was kind of we all knew what would happen as a result of that. Maybe not the details, but we knew it was going to be. It meant leaving the EU. So before I move on to the next bit, what I just want to do is make sure, because it's kind of a presentation slightly of two halves, is just take a moment just to make sure I've said the things I want to say, which I think I have. Keep any questions coming in, because I'm going to be really happy to take them at the end. So I want to kind of move into now a little bit more of my personal perspective on this, personal journey with this. So as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, my kind of philosophy here around simplifying grammar, punctuation to make messaging as accessible as possible, and therefore as inclusive as possible, is really all hinges back to my own dyslexia. And you can go to wherever you get your podcasts, and listen to me, series 6 episode 4, so me and Asif having a chat about my dyslexia and my experience with that. So during my schooling, and even after I was diagnosed with dyslexia, reading was a big issue for me. I still read very slowly, but at least I have got to the point where I do understand roughly what's on the page. But what I need is for ideally for things, for documents, for any written messaging to be as simple as possible. I can then consume that and engage with it far more easily. As I said earlier, being sat down with a nice new regulatory report is kind of my idea of hell. So what I do is put myself in the shoes of people who perhaps don't have the reading age, the skill to be able to do that as well as everyone else. Because when I think about what I do as a communicator, I want the messages that me and the team create to cut through to as many people as possible. And I think that means the first step in achieving inclusivity with everything we do is to not dumb the message down, but to deliver it in a way that as many people as possible understand. So it's not to say don't use grammar, don't use punctuation. They're both really important, but just think about how everything is being structured, and think about how messaging is come across, and can everyone in your audience understand it. And I think what that does is brings us to a point where I would quite like people to ask questions, and failing that, you can share your views with me on social media, but maybe Tila will pop up in a second and I will stop sharing the screen and we can take some questions. There we go.
Oh, thank you very much. I did pop up and then I popped back down again. Yeah, very interesting. And I enjoyed it. I am so skeptical about that age and I thing. And I think it is tricky, isn't it? Because I know that I don't want to believe it, because working in education as my previous role, I know that we could very easily get to an average reading age because it was something that was tested a lot of the time. But I think obviously when we look at the general public, it's something that is not as scientific in that testing, is it? But I still don't.
Yeah. So there's definitely. I mean, I would need to. What I'll do is the report I went and double checked this on earlier this week. I'll dig that back out and I'll share it on socials actually. Now, that's from. I can't remember which one now. This is really bad. I should really be able to put the source in front of you. But it's from a kind of reputable charity. Exactly how that research was done, I don't know. And I mean that's kind of there's a message there for everyone is check your sources and make sure it's fully understood.
100%. But I think that more important than that is the point that you raise in that actually when we're communicating with people, we need to think about, I think we're kind of well versed in looking at it through a disability lens now and thinking, are our font choices, like those typefaces that we're selecting, are we choosing the best ones? But I think sometimes we kind of move on from that, and I guess maybe that's been in a silo of a lot of people in the industry have lots of qualifications, and so maybe you assume that actually if I can understand it, everybody should be able to understand it. But I think very important that you are kind of using those techniques, those short sentences and things like that.
I agree with so much of that. So everyone watching, we work with messages, words every day, so we're all pretty adept at it, or we probably should be. But not everyone in the outside world is. Lots of people don't want to pick a pen up, and don't want to read anything longer than they possibly have to, and that's just a reality.
Yeah, and I think besides that, we were talking in backstage, weren't we, about how we've also got those challenges of communicating with people who are, English is an additional language. Obviously, a massive influx of, or not as big as it probably should have been, but of Ukrainian refugees who may struggle with that communication. So, yeah, especially when you're dealing with such a big audience, to think of those. It's something that I could talk about all day, but we do have other people who have questions for you, and I shall defer to them now. So first of all, we've got lots of other people kind of being like, "What?" Some people, Sarah Dakin knew it. So that was a stat that you said, probably a lot of people familiar with. Um, thank you. And so we've got a question. Oh, I actually was going to ask Marco's question first, and that is, do you think that recall or recognition is more important when trying to get a brand message across?
So a different one came. I was reading a different question then, and I've totally confused
Yeah,
myself.
sorry. So
Say the question again. No,
this is come
we'll try and
from,
answer everything.
this has come from the chat, which is maybe
Oh,
why it's
okay, right.
confusing. So this is from Marco, and he's asking, do you think that recall or recognition is more important when trying to get a brand message across?
So
And I
I mean,
believe he works with you.
yeah, he does. So Marco's one of our brand new apprentices. He's doing great work. He was helping put together the better slides were the ones he put together, and I added the less good ones in. So well done, Marco, for absolutely putting me on the spot. He was contractually obliged to ask a nice question. So recall and recognition, I mean, it's a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it? So you need one to get the other. You got to recognize it in order to then recall it. So and if that's the way I'm going to go, I think you need recognition in order for people to recall it later. So probably the first step is the most important one. That's the Thomas theory on it anyway.
Thank you, Ed. Right, let's go to our actual question box. And yeah, we've got a fair few in here. Actually, Marco did indeed ask his question in the right place. So. Sarah asks, is grammar more important for some groups than others? We've all had those messages back from stakeholders with corrections.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the people that read Eat Shoots Leap, whatever that book's called, it's really important for them. I've never read that book, so it's not particularly important for me. But we've all published those posts with the spelling mistake. We've all been there, and you put yourself in the smart aleck who do you mean this or this, or have you got there and there the wrong way around, and all of that stuff. Of course, that's really important. Yes, it's more important for some groups. I would say it's less important for groups who are maybe at the lower end of that reading age. So if there's just lots of grammar that makes the sentence quite complicated, it's important because it totally removes the ability to understand. Now, it's also less important because they're just not engaging. So it depends a little bit on perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Next question is from Emma. How do you manage in your role? And then I think you say it different to how I thought it was pronounced, and obviously you're right. Is it? So it's not
Rekin.
Rekin.
No. Yeah.
We can make adjustments for you or others. Is this something other businesses should do?
So I'm going to kind of take that as does my employer make adjustment for my dyslexia? No, but that's because I don't ask for any adjustment. So Rekin will make appropriate adjustments for any for if anyone needs an adjustment, it'll be made. But I don't ask for one. But there are things that employers can do for dyslexics. There are there's a whole kind of community of businesses who've put management and hiring managers through specific training. There are businesses and organizations that specifically look out for people with dyslexia because dyslexics have their brains wired in a different way. That's a bit of a catch-all simplified version for the sake of us answering the question quickly. But organizations like GCHQ will kind of upgrade you in a recruitment process because they want people to think in a slightly different way. And that I think that where I will read a little bit later, slower, and actually some of that. So we all said we're all comfortable with on the word side of things, and I can do that. But I think what my edge as a dyslexic communicator, and I talked about this in the podcast with Asif, is on making connections in a slightly different way, and that's my kind of perception on it, rightly or wrongly, and that doesn't mean to say if you don't have the dyslexia label you can't do that stuff, because absolutely, and anyone can. It's just that's just the label I have, and some of the characteristics that go with it. The Virgin Atlantic or the whole Virgin Group, Richard Branson's dyslexic, and he's quite passionate about talking about it. And there's lots of quite high-profile people you would never consider to be dyslexic. Einstein, Tom Cruise, a few others.
Yeah, cool. I would encourage everyone to listen to the podcast actually, because I think you go into quite a bit of depth about those kind of, I guess working adjustments, don't you? And how you've kind of navigated your way through that.
I created my own coping mechanisms like at school, and I basically still use them.
Yeah. Right. I think we don't quite have time for. I think we have two more questions. So we've got one from Caroline. We've answered that one, and then one from Andrew Gledall. Could I ask Caroline and Andrew to just ask those on Twitter, so we can kind of get ready for the next session? Are you going to be about, Ed? I know you're a big CommsHero fan, aren't you? So I guess you're going to be networking and things like that.
Yeah, I'll dive onto a networking table. So if Andrew or Caroline want to jump on there, go for it. Absolutely, ask on Twitter.
Yeah, ace. Well, thank you again for joining us, Ed, and for giving your insights into that. Yep, absolutely. Go off and listen to the podcast, and there's also some other, lots of great speakers on there, lots of great topics covered. I have to say thank you to our sponsors, because I haven't said that all day. I'm a terrible host, aren't I? But a huge, massive thank you for Ed, and we'll see you later, Ed, and we'll see you across socials.
Thank you. And that podcast has got a really good write-up as well.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
Who did that, I wonder? Now I'm worried that it was absolutely not written for, the reading age of an idea.
Anyway, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.